Hi there, my name's Scott McDonald, and today I'm going to do a 1-hour challenge in which I attempt to learn a new, terrifying trick in 60 minutes or less. Today's challenge is to learn a backward roll drop-in on Trampwall, and I know a backwards roll does not sound big or terrifying, but fear is subjective like that. The thing is, about 10 years ago I did my first and only attempt of this trick, I smashed the back of my head against the wall, and I never tried again. This morning I decided it was time to finally face my fears, so you'll have to keep watching to see whether or not I succeeded, but either way, I hope you enjoy watching the process. I figured the best approach would be to start patiently and keep everything as safe as possible, so instead of starting on the wall, or even on a block beside the foam pit, I decided to start in the middle of the pit. I began by just rolling from a few different places on the mat and seeing which placement would make it easiest to generate rotation. I was really concerned about staying too close and hitting the back of my head again, going too far out and hitting my head on the springs, stalling out and not completing the rotation, and I really just didn't know what I was going to do from a technique standpoint, so starting out here seemed like the best bet. It seemed like the best results were coming from having the corner touch my back just beneath my shoulder blades when I rolled, so next, I started experimenting with different ways of using my arms, and it quickly became obvious that swinging them into the roll made things way easier than starting with them already holding my legs. Since the setup was so low that it was basically impossible to get more rotation than this, I decided to add a block. My first attempt with this extra height felt really good, but on the second one, I felt like I got kinda caught and couldn't rotate smoothly. I wasn't really sure what caused this yet, but it didn't seem like too big of a deal, and since the block was both unstable and still very low, I decided it was time to move over to a short tramp wall. To continue keeping things as safe as possible, I unfolded a panel mat to cover the corner and the face of the wall, then covered the bed with a bunch of mats. I climbed up on top to test out whether or not I'd even have space to do the roll, and I was mentally preparing myself to do the trick when I realized maybe if I just looked over one shoulder, I could cheat things and do it in a much more approachable way. This turned out to be a huge game changer and made everything feel way less scary, even if it was super cheated and not really a backwards roll. I did one more where I tried to cheat a little bit less, and then I decided on the next attempt I would commit to looking straight backward for the trampoline. Yeah, as it turns out, looking backward is not a good idea. This is what makes you hit the wall with the back of your head. Thankfully, the panel mat kept there from being any real impact, and this also solved the mystery of why would I hit my head on the wall, so I decided to do another one where I kept my chin tucked. This felt really good, so I kept drilling using this technique, and once it became apparent that my landing was consistently going to the exact same place, I removed one mat, which immediately gave me way more rebound. It took me a couple reps to acclimate to this amount of power, but once I did, I switched to an even smaller mat, did one quick rep, and then removed the mat and decided to drop into the bed itself. Now that I knew how the return would feel with full power, I decided it was time to bite the bullet and remove my last remaining safety device, which was the panel mat covering the corner and the face. Removing mats is always spooky, and this is the one that was really keeping me more confident, but I also realized it should give me more clearance from my head as long as I didn't panic or change my technique, and it was good. At this point, I felt very relieved because I had technically completed the challenge in just about half an hour, but given that this is Trampwall, I wasn't going to fully count it unless I did this trick short ways instead of just long ways. Given that all of my attempts so far had stayed pretty close to the wall, I wasn't really concerned about going too far, so I just tried to turn off my fears and copy-paste the technique that I had used previously. Thankfully, fully committing worked super well, but on my second try, I felt myself graze the wall with the back of my head and pushed off to go to the bed. This didn't hurt at all, but it was a bit spooky and I hate ending on a bad note, so I did a couple more to reset my technique. When everything felt normal again, I was very tempted to call it a day, but in the back of my mind, I knew I wouldn't truly feel accomplished unless I did this trick off of a taller wall. Theoretically, having this extra airtime should just mean that I could control the trick more easily, so instead of repeating this entire setup with mats and everything, I just decided to turn off my fears and focus on doing the correct technique. Fortunately, this worked great, and it was actually quite a lot easier to do on the 8-foot, so before I had time to talk myself out of it again, I headed over to the 10-foot wall. I figured if the trick was easy on 8 feet, it would be even easier on 10 feet, so once again I just committed to turning off my mind and doing the trick, got it done safely, and finally gave myself permission to consider the challenge complete. So there you have it. All told, this process took about 45 minutes from start to finish, and I think that's a really great reminder not to let little things become huge obstacles in your mind. All of this was caused by one small accident 10 years ago, and rather than trying again, I just avoided it for a whole decade. I'm super glad I finally faced my fears, as it turns out backwards rolls are a lot of fun and actually pretty easy, so I'm looking forward to doing more of them, but I'm gonna wrap things up now. I hope you could relate to this idea of overcoming your own fears, and until next time, good luck and happy training.